I am Kathy Maness, Councilwoman from Lexington, South Carolina, and proud to serve as the president of the National League of Cities. For nearly 2 years, local leaders have led their communities through crisis. The global pandemic brought about unprecedented public health and economic challenges that rippled through our nation. During these difficult times, local leaders stepped up to ensure the health and safety of our communities. And now they are leading the way for sustainable recovery. We had to respond, recover, and now rebuild to meet the needs of our communities. Cities, towns, and villages continue to ensure that local businesses remain afloat and competitive, that residents have access to food and the shelter that they need, and that critical public health initiatives are in place. Local leaders are doing all of this in a time of increased polarization and growing instability. Harassment, threats, and violence directed at local leaders are rising at an alarming rate, especially since the start of the pandemic. Yet local leaders still press on. And when cities, towns, and villages raise their collective voice to advocate for the best interest of their residents, federal leaders pay attention. Earlier this week, along with congressional leaders and other local elected officials, I was at the White House as President Biden signed the bipartisan Infrastructure, Investment, and Jobs Act into law. That's a turning point. That's a big deal. We are ushering in historic investments in Americans' infrastructure. And you know, roads, bridges, broadband, that's not a Republican or a Democratic problem. That is an American problem. And this signing of this bill, it's going to be huge for the cities, towns, and villages across America. As local leaders are ready to ensure that these funds will be sent responsibly and transparently to help fuel a widespread recovery and rebuilding. Now, before I introduce our next speaker, just a quick note to the press who are on the call with us today, and thank you so much for joining us. If you have a question, please leave your name, your news outlet, and questions in the Q&A box below. We will answer the questions at the end of the call. Thank you so much for being here. And now I'm going to turn it over to the Vice President of the National League of Cities, Mayor Vince Williams of Union City, Georgia.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you all for joining us today. During an unprecedented time, NLC launched a year-long advocacy campaign that resulted in $65 billion of direct aid to every city, town, and village in these United States, a historic first for our nation. Every community has different needs, but NLC has been there every step of the way to help communities make the most out of the funds. The federal funding NLC helped secure has proven to be critical to local governments. Direct aid and federal grants have allowed local governments to fill budget gaps and also maintain vital services. They have enabled cities, towns, and villages to complete or restart stalled infrastructure projects that will deliver massive benefits to their residential communities. And of course, they have helped fund the public health initiatives that will help America emerge from the pandemic. We are grateful to all of our partners who supported our advocacy, but also including the 172 organizations that joined our coalition, our state municipal leagues, and our corporate partners who helped us successfully deliver this critical aid. It is not enough to simply allocate funds. We know that. NLC's ARPA Technical Assistance Grant Navigation Program provided local governments with assistance and guidance to help collect the necessary data and secure the funding they need. What once started as a pilot program in 4 states has since expanded to reach more than a quarter of the US population in 13 states. And we hope to scale it to nationwide as cities, towns, and villages across this nation continue to deploy federal funds and continue on a path towards a long-term recovery from the effects of the pandemic. And now I'd like to introduce Mayor Victoria Woodard, our second Vice President of the National League of Cities. Mayor Woodard.
Thank you, Vincent. Thank you so much for the introduction, Mayor Williams. Earlier this week, President Biden signed into law the historic Infrastructure Investment Act. And like President Manus, I had the honor of joining President Biden at the White House to commemorate this once-in-a-generation investment in America's infrastructure. I was proud to represent the thousands of local leaders across the country that will now be able to proceed with long overdue infrastructure projects, including making updates to transportation networks and water systems and enhancing broadband capabilities. This legislation is not just a game changer for cities, it's a life changer for communities across the country. Cities are ready to rebuild, and this investment will help them get moving. On the list of overdue projects, strengthening broadband in Independence, Minnesota, making roads easier and safer for travel in Ferndale, Michigan, fixing bridges right here in Tukwila, Washington, replacing old lead water pipes in Buffalo, New York, and the list goes on and on. Now, to make sure we get these projects completed, we're going to need enough workers ready and trained to get the job done. Right now, we are at a deficit of skilled workers. In fact, an NLC report found that if we do nothing to improve labor market outcomes for infrastructure-related jobs, we can anticipate that as a nation, we will struggle to fill at least 4.5 million jobs. We're still pushing for passage of the Build Back Better Act, which includes $40 billion in overall funding towards direct higher education and workforce programs. So with that, let me turn it over to our immediate past president of NLC, Councilmember Joe Buscaino. Joe?
Thank you so much, Mayor Woodard. It's great to be here with my fellow officers, and I see at this press conference a number of local elected officials throughout this country. Thank you, members and colleagues, for joining us. What's before us is a life-changing investment in cities. What is going to happen in this is going to provide transformational funding to help cities, including $550 billion in new investments in America's infrastructure. Now attention in Congress is turning to the Build Back Better Act, which could unlock even more transformative support for America's cities, towns, and villages. The Build Back Better Act emphasizes several of NLC's key priority areas, including workforce development, combating climate change, and housing affordability. The bill includes $550 billion dedicated to addressing climate change, building community resilience, and investing in clean energy. And part of this funding would establish a civilian climate corps to train and provide jobs for our young people, veterans, and others in clean energy, sustainable infrastructure, conservation, and more. The bill also includes $150 billion for housing stability to bring about the construction, rehabilitation, and restoration of more than 1 million affordable homes, as well as significantly expand assistance for low-income households and first-time and first-generation home buyers. These provisions stand to boost the supply of affordable housing units nationwide, including in rural communities, and reduce price pressures for renters and homeowners alike. And that's not all. The Build Back Better Act also includes other provisions to strengthen local communities and residents, ranging from investments in childcare and early childhood education, support for caregivers, an expansion of free school meals, and much more. We so look forward to working closely with Congress to ensure that these important items and more are included in any final package. Together, the American Rescue Plan Act, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and the Build Back Better Act will pave the way for sustained recovery. Now, help me welcome our NLC CEO and Executive Director, Clarence Anthony. Clarence.
Hey, Clarence. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councilman Buscaino, and thank you all for joining us. And I'd like to thank all of our officers for their leadership. Welcome to City Summit 2021, our annual convening. This year, we have over 18,000 delegates who are participating virtually to learn, to share, and as well to bond with each other virtually. This is the moment for cities to lead, and we have. We partner with our state municipal leagues, we partner with Congress and the Biden administration. And one thing I want to make clear is we did it. We delivered during a tough time for every city, town, and village in America. And this is just the start of that partnership that is necessary in America to make sure that the investments that are being made from the federal government that are coming to communities is used in a way that it transforms lives for the people that live in those communities. You know, the infrastructure dollars has paved the way for sustainable recovery as well as transformative growth in our cities all over America. You know, even though we've been fighting on the front lines for ARPA as well as for the infrastructure money that's coming, we've also had to fight as local leaders are facing an uphill battle when it comes to harassment, threats, and violence directed toward them. We've just conducted a recent survey that found that these incidents are rising at an alarming rate, with 87% of local officials surveyed observed increase in attacks on public officials. And 81% reported having experienced harassment, threats, and violence against themselves. But not only them, their family members, their children are being cyber bullied. This behavior has dramatically worsened since the start of the pandemic, at a time when local officials are juggling multiple crises in their community. And understandably, the local officials surveyed say that harassment and attacks have made it difficult for them to do their job effectively and serve their constituents. You know, the sad thing is some of them have even resigned or chose not to run for re-election due to the potential risk and safety and well-being. While the harassment is most frequently occurring on social media, it is bleeding into other venues from public city meetings to the front lawns and houses of local officials. In this environment, it's all too easy to forget that our local leaders are also human. They're not just mayors, council members, commissioners, trustees, they're parents, their friends, their neighbors, and so much more. And I have to say this has got to stop. And we're, as a local organization, the National League of Cities, and our members are committed to doing that. Our board of directors talking about yesterday being committed to being an example of how you model civility, engagement, and leadership. We will not allow this to continue to happen in our communities, our neighborhood, our states, and our nation. And local leaders will be on the front line, not just in regards to harassment and threats. We're going to be on the front line leading civility, engagement, and working to strengthen our democracy. That's what the National League of Cities membership is committed to. And we're going to make sure that our leaders and our members have the tools in hand that they need to fight and turn this trend that is going on throughout America. Now, thank you so much again. And we're going to take questions. And as a reminder to the press on the call, please leave your name, your outlet, and questions in the Q&A box below. And we'd look forward to responding to those questions. And again, thank you for being here. And let me ask, are there any questions?
Clarence, it looks like we have a question from Andy Castillo.
All right. Andy? Go ahead and pose your question.
I believe it's in the chat box.
What role will NLC be playing in the NTIA rulemaking for broadband funding from the infrastructure bill? How much will NLC be engaging state governments on how to distribute the broadband dollars? I can start that, and Irma may want to also, unless one of the officers would like to start.
Well, I know that NLC, Kathy Manus, Lexington, South Carolina, president of NLC. I know that our federal advocacy committee, our staff there, they have worked very hard to send out information to our local leaders about how funds will be able to be used. And so the members of the National League of Cities will be able to get a lot of information from the National League of Cities.
And I'll add and let Irma also weigh in on this. We've been meeting with Commerce and EDA, and we've been reached out to and coordinating with them to make sure that especially the rural and small communities have access to the information, have access to the grant dollars that are available. And we will work specifically with those agencies to make sure that those dollars are, or those plans and the grant dollars are available. Irma, anything else to add? And please introduce yourself.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Irma Esparza Diggs, and I'm the director of NLC's federal advocacy efforts. So the infrastructure bill makes the largest one-time federal investment in broadband infrastructure and local cybersecurity, and creates the first ever dedicated program for digital equity. Most of that funding is going to be routed through state governments. There are some programs that are available as competitive grants that local governments can compete for. In addition, some of that state funding is intended to be passed directly to localities. The bill also, I'll just add that the bill does make important changes to policy related to equity and on physical broadband infrastructure with connectivity programs through the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. All of these programs, cities will be paying attention to and working with their state colleagues to ensure they can utilize that money to address their broadband priorities, whether it includes enabling middle mile broadband or digital equity. Cities intend and very much will be positioned to work closely to ensure that they can meet their connectivity and affordability needs that they have. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from Andy Castillo, American City County. The question is, what's the greatest challenge communities will face in equitably distributing these funds? Mayor Williams, any thoughts on that, and Mayor Woodards?
Well, Vince Williams, Mayor of Union City, Georgia. I have to say, Andy and anyone else listening, cities won't have a challenge truly equitably distributing the funds. All cities, and I can't think of one city that doesn't understand the specific needs that they have and the priorities that are in front of them. So local leaders will be focused on making sure that every area that these funds are to be distributed to, and also the communities, that the different priorities that we all have, there will be a balance, if you will, where we make sure that those funds address those particular issues. So we don't have the issues that many leaders have. We know exactly where the bombs are, if you will, and we know how to get it to it. Now that we have this funding to assist us to be able to take care of years and years of infrastructure ills, but now we're looking at broadband and other particular ills that we need to deal with in our communities. These funds will go a long way, and I think local leaders understand it best. It's just giving us the opportunity to do what we have been elected to do, and that is to drive the positivity that this nation is built upon the backs of many of our previous leaders over the years. So it's all about making sure that we all secure a piece of the promise for each and every family in this nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. Mayor Woodard's from Tacoma, Washington. I would just add, I think there may be a small challenge, but the challenge will not be the how. The challenge will be that there are so many needs in our communities to be addressed. And so being able, and that's what mayors do every day. We have to balance the needs of our entire community. So I think, but balancing those needs and making sure that we can have the greatest impact, that we make the greatest impact with these funds. And the second part of that question, what can be done to overcome the challenges? That's why NLC is here. That's why we have amazing staff who show up every day to help cities and to provide support for cities. So when cities are facing that struggle, NLC is here as a resource. We have hundreds of employees who show up every day to help cities and to support cities across this country. And so I speak not only to answering that question, but to cities who are out there who need the support. That's why NLC fought so hard. That's why we advocated on behalf of cities, and we'll be here to support cities through the entire process.
Councilman Buscaino, any additional comments?
No, I think Victoria and Vince did it service. Yes.
Well, thank you guys. Bill, with Route 50 question. Hey, Bill, good to see you again. Could the mayors and council members on the call provide some detail about what stage they are in spending their ARPA funds and any challenges that they have arisen in that process?
I can jump in
I'll
on
start
that,
with that.
Clarence. Yeah, I can jump in on that because I had a council meeting last night, and we just brought on a contract company that is noted for a lot of these types of contractual implementations of these large funds. I didn't want to get my staff bogged down here in the city with doing something they didn't know what to do, but also to make sure that we did the right thing and to take away any opportunity of making a wrong decision. So certainly bringing in someone with the expertise to be able to help us facilitate these funds, but also make sure that they go directly to those issues and priorities that we want to address. It keeps my city staff out of the purview of dealing with that, but also it keeps the elected officials in front of making sure that every area is being touched. So, you know, there are a lot of nuances to all of this, and certainly making sure that we are legal, making sure that we follow the guidelines, which there aren't a whole lot of negatives to the guidelines. So certainly we're still learning and also getting more information from Treasury, but certainly making sure that you have the right person guiding the ship, if you will. So those are one of the things that we have certainly reached out to a number of organizations that do this every day, not just for local governments, but for state agencies as well. So we have a credible organization that's going to assist us with getting these funds to where we need to place them.
Thank you. President Maness.
Sure. I am from South Carolina, and as many of you may know, we were one of the last states to pull the money down. So we, in the last, I'd say 3 weeks, we just got our money. Our council met this summer to talk about how we were going to spend the money, but we are just now getting the money down. So we are in the early stages of spending the money because we were one of the last states to get it.
Well, thank you all so much, the members of the press, and I can't thank the leadership of the National League of Cities enough for your commitment during this tough and difficult time that we're having in our nation. But we're going to continue to deliver. We're going to continue to work hard And we're going to continue to show America how you partner to get things done. Now, it is time for our opening general session. And I'm so excited about it. Kickoff City Summit 2021. Here we go. Hey, guys, thank you. See y'all later.
you.
All right. Thanks to the
Thank y'all
press.
for being on.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.